The theme of our seminar series altogether is Liverpool's food culture. Have we got one? Question mark, because we weren't sure. The people we spoke to about what Liverpool does food-wise, we're not really sure that we had the kind of culture that we wanted to have, that we thought there was really room to improve and develop how we look at food. So we began in our first seminar looking at the national picture of the food strategy for the UK and looking at what the food system was. And Sheila Dillon, who came from BBC Radio 4, the food programme, was exceptional and really honest. For somebody from the BBC these days, she was honest and wasn't at all afraid of some of the things that she wanted to say. So I was hugely impressed. She was wonderful. And then last time we had the inspirational project of Kindling Farm, and Helen is here, and Hayley tonight from the farm as well. And that was just extraordinary to hear the commitment of another generation of younger people who are not just complaining about what's going on, but actually making a difference, wanting to get stuck in and change the food system. And it was a really wonderful seminar for the second one. And tonight we're focusing down again to the local area, ourselves, your home, our city, and we've got Lucy here sitting next to me. But before we go into any more details, I want to ask you to do something which we ask every single time Engage has any event, and that is to introduce yourself to somebody you didn't come with, somebody you've not met before, just your name and why you're here. So if you have to move around, please move around. It's important that you don't just chat to people you know. Name and why you're here.
I'm exempt from this, Jerry.
You're not exempt. Even I'm not exempt. Tonight's seminar is entitled Food, Home and Away. Are we making the best decisions? That's about ourselves. It's about what can we do. We've been looking at national picture, which is very, very hard for us to influence. We're looking at the regional picture in terms of growing food, also quite difficult for us to influence. But actually tonight is really down to us. The decisions we can make, the choices we're making about our food at home. So we're being led tonight by the amazing Lucy Antal, Senior Project Manager for Regional Food Economy and Lead for Food Justice at FoodRise. Lucy is also the Director of Alchemic Kitchen CIC and winner of the BBC Food and Farming Award for Community Food Champion 2021, which is wonderful. So thank you. Tonight we're guests of The Daffodil, an extraordinary project led by Brookside actor Phil Olivier to rescue this former Mersey ferry and preserve it for future generations whilst promoting excellence in food and hospitality. We're delighted that a series on food culture could find a welcome here in one of our newest food producers on the waterfront. Those who came previously know that we're being treated before the start of each seminar to the taste of a locally produced food. In the first course, we had the delicious soup and bread provided by Toxteth-based Squash Liverpool. For the main course, we ate the famous pies from Home Baked Anfield, which were delicious. And tonight, most of you, if not all of you, have tasted the mouth-watering apple crumble dessert made by Food for Thought, which is based in the Dingle. We invited 3 local producers to speak at each seminar about the challenges they face in their chosen career, so we can become aware of the struggles many of them confront on a daily basis. Tom Lambeth, Chief Executive Officer of Food for Thought, who have 20 years been serving healthy and tasty meals, and I said earlier, to over 90 member schools in and around Liverpool. Sadly, Tom cannot be here tonight due to bereavement leave, and we're very sorry that he's not able to make it. But it's a real joy to welcome Fawzia Chowdhury. founder of Fozia's Kashmiri Kitchen on Picton Road, and about to move into Renshaw Street. So very exciting times, right back into the city. Fozia began her career, her food journey, passed through Squash Liverpool, whom we had here on our first seminar. And we had hoped to welcome our second chef in the series, James Muirhead, from this boat, the Daffodil. But one of the problems facing hospitality is the crisis of staffing. And so he's unable to be with us tonight due to having to work here in the kitchens because of staff shortages. So we're very disappointed, obviously. We wanted to showcase what the Daffodil was doing, but it hasn't been possible to hear from James. And this series has been indebted to Feeding Liverpool for their generous financial support. They are the city's Food Alliance lead, supporting the development of a more equitable, sustainable food system for everybody in our city. The success of the Food Alliance is built upon broad representation, lived experience, and expertise. Keenan Humble, on my left, Programme Director, and I'm quoting, has said something really nice about us. These three events are a brilliant demonstration of community organising, encapsulating a key principle of Liverpool's Good Food Plan to enable active food citizenship. So, I don't know whether any of you follow this influencer, but I think he's stunning. As Scouse Ghetto Gourmet, Jerome Griffin, would say, enough faffing about, let's see the menu. Please give a very warm Liverpool welcome to Lucy Antal.
Okay. Right, I've been told I have to move to this side, so. Okay. Thank you very much for the nice welcome. Great to be here. I'm hoping we're not going to have any kind of Titanic nonsense going on this evening, but I believe that the exit's that way. Right, me, I guess. I work for Foodrise, as Jerry mentioned, and we are a campaigning charity that focuses on food systems that should be fair to people and planet. And we would like to see, maybe naively, but we're optimists at heart, that food systems could be recalibrated from the current profit at all costs existing one to one that actually supports social value, local economy, and doesn't trash the planet at the same time. So, despite the lack of accent, I am actually a Scouser, born here. My dad was Hungarian, so he sounded like Count Dracula from Sesame Street. So, you can be very thankful I didn't pick his accent up. But yeah, I've been based here most of my life. Grew up here, went to school here. And my team and I work across different communities within this space, and we know that fresh food simply isn't available in quite a lot of those spaces. And part of the USP of our parent charity Foodrise is that we like to use the commentary and discussions from community and from individuals to then look at what we can campaign about. So I'll give some examples of that in a while, but it's very much that we want to hear the voices of people and be able to use those questions and things that people ask us about to engage and look at our different sort of campaigns, as it were. So as Sheila Dillon explained so eloquently at our first session, time is running out for the planet. And we absolutely must challenge the status quo of the current Leave It to Tesco approach. It's not working. Neighbourhoods have been hollowed out by the hypermarkets, resulting in the closure of small food businesses in favour of so-called convenience stores, which basically just stock junk food and vapes. At the moment, supermarkets make up 96.7% of all grocery retail in the UK, which is one hell of a figure. So when they tell you that they can't do something because they don't have the power, they're lying big time. having this hollowing out has also affected the social fabric of community spaces. So it removes opportunities to connect because, frankly, there isn't time to have a chat as it goes down the belt in the supermarket, and somebody's always on a different shift. So you might see somebody, you know, but it's unlikely. By closing all of these smaller spaces, smaller shops, etc., it removes those opportunities to connect, to meet, and to share experiences in communal spaces. And in particular, that's affecting older people, young parents, and solo householders. And they lose the opportunity to socialise with their neighbours. And that also then leads to isolation and a bit of a narrow life experience for them. And I can give a concrete example of this. As one of the things that I do, I help support the running of the Queen of Greens. And we go to a stop in Anfield, and there's a young single dad that gets on every time and sort of stays there for a while talking about football with my drivers, because he'll say to them, "You're the first adults I've seen all week," and it's just him and his little son, and he doesn't get out and he doesn't get to talk to anyone. So going to the bus is a highlight for him because it's an opportunity for him to talk to people. So, look, I've done all sorts of lovely things. Right, okay, dot to dot. This is where I'm sort of talking about the role of food being a social glue, and it's an opportunity to build health and education outcomes, which are always massively underestimated by policymakers and by conventional capitalist models, because it embraces economics, it embraces health, food security, education, climate change, and even more. Social value is not given the platform it deserves when decisions are made regarding investment, and I use that word very carefully because for a lot of smaller businesses, it's about finding grants and getting help and having to take out a loan. But we need investment in these spaces. We need support. The consideration is not given either to the importance of revenue staying within the immediate area. You know, the board of Tesco's is not based in Liverpool. You know, the money is not staying here, it's going elsewhere. And we had Sally Ann from Home Baked in the last event talking about how £1 spent at Home Baked translates to £6 of social value, because they specifically source a lot of their ingredients and they employ local staff, etc. So that's something that really needs to be brought home and emphasised, particularly around things like procurement, or if you are going to be doing an event, you know, don't get your butties from Morrison's, you know, go and see if there's a local caterer who can help you out. So this is about, well, I mean, it's very typical of a lot of areas. All those photos I took in Liverpool, apart from the cartoon on the bottom, which I nicked wholeheartedly, but I do love it because it sums up to me, you know, a Scouse nan going, "No, I'm moving it, love, it's not happening." So what I talk about here is about the access to food, and this is the issue of food injustice that I'm probably most passionate about, because if you can't easily access good fresh food where you live, you are already at a disadvantage. Nobody knows yet the extent of how much damage has been done to the health and educational outcomes of a generation who have grown up reliant on food aid. So there's one for the academics in the room. I would love someone to do a study on that, because I suspect the answers are not going to be great. Access to food kind of covers a whole range of things. It's not always about your income level. It's also about the availability in your area of what's there. It's the presence of healthy food options and the quantity of food available. It's the geographical location and whether or not you can actually physically walk to it, or is there a public transport? Because for a lot of people, a car ownership is out of their reach. And all, of course, the big supermarkets are never quite in your area. They're always like somewhere over the hill. It's about the acceptability. So it's things like the cultural preferences and dietary habits of individuals and communities. So I was chatting to a young mum in a food bank, and she told me that she had to stop being a vegetarian because she couldn't get enough vegetarian food by relying on a food pantry or food bank, because she couldn't get any vegetarian products. that was suitable for her. So she kind of went back to eating meat because that way at least she could get the right nutrients. And that's the sort of thing when I talk about not availability. So people's choices end up being narrowed right down. And we have the same issue with people from communities where they want halal meat or they can't have certain other things. The options and the ideas of that being available through food banks and food pantries, although every effort is made, is rarely as good as it could be. The other area, of course, is accommodation. So it's about meeting specific needs of vulnerable populations, including those with disabilities or chronic diseases. Back during lockdown, I had the great pleasure of working with Keenan, where we were supplying hearty soups to communities across Knowsley and the edge of Liverpool. And we were being contacted by Macmillan nurses who said they had cancer sufferers who couldn't leave the house but couldn't get any food. So we were helping to get fruit and vegetable delivered to those doors because they weren't able to spend enough money to make it worthwhile for a shopping drop-off. I mean, this was before delivery really got going, but that was a classic example of how someone who is vulnerable, who is suffering from a chronic condition, couldn't actually leave the house to get the right sort of food for them. So, also to put sort of some of this in a bit of a local context for everyone, we did a study with the University of Liverpool where we looked at availability of food, and it came out that 70% of all residents in Knowsley, irrespective of their income level or where they lived, actually were living in what could be classified as a food desert. And that means that fresh food, or often any food, is not even available within 1,500 metres of their home. It's easier in some of these areas around Merseyside to put a bet on a horse than it is to buy an apple. And that's quite terrifying in many ways. So, status quo, not the band. There's a desire amongst many to solve food insecurity through the application of charity. We started out in 2008 with 26,000 people needing to use around 30 food banks. That was in the whole of the UK. We've now got 3.12 million needing to use them, and there's over 2,871 official food banks. That's not including all the little ones that are set up in parishes and everywhere else. So we're not really just firefighting at this point, it's becoming a secondary food economy with food pantries and huge distribution organisations and businesses who are also sometimes looking at this as a way to move on their food waste. So I was part of a group of people at Food Rise where we started asking questions of people who actually work in that area. So we were talking to people from food pantries and food banks across Britain, and we said to them, do you get good food from these, redistribution? And the average was 30% of what was received wasn't fit for purpose and had to go straight in the bin. And a lot of the time that was fresh food, which had to go in the bin because it was held onto for so long in the options of somebody picking it up in the supermarket or whatever. By the time it got to the food bank, it was like literally one day to go. There was an incident a couple of Christmases ago where something like 16,000 eggs rocked up to the food banks of Liverpool with one day usage. And, I don't think there were enough omelettes being made that day. And the fact that they also came in like boxes of 1,600, it was insane. But again, it was something that someone just moved on because they didn't have to deal with it. So it was left to the food banks to have to sort these eggs out. There's a lot of emotive language, greenwashing, and a lot of blatant PR spins on the feel-good factor of helping the, inverted commas, needy, not my word. Back in the days when Twitter was actually usable, I got into a bit of a fight with Waitrose because they'd posted a picture of a sort of like a little, when you go around a supermarket and they've got like these, have you tried this and have you had that? And they'd put perfect for the food bank. And I was like, oh, I don't like that. It's a bit perky, that. And, got into quite a fight with a lot of people who thought I was being mean to Waitrose, but I was like, not having it. So you know, the other side of that is if you are buying food in the supermarket to put in the food bank thing, you're also helping them profit. Because they're not giving food away, they're encouraging you to buy food at full price for them to then pass on. So they make money whatever you do. It's a way of just helping them to realise more profit. And when you see the things where they talk about meals that have been donated, that's because somebody's done a bit of a calculation using the tonnage of whatever food has been passed on by the average weight of a plate. And then they've divided that and said, oh yeah, we've given away X million meals. You know, like, no, you haven't. You've given away random ingredients that then people are like, okay, I've got 500 pita breads. Now what? And that happens a lot. So we did this used by thing. We were very lucky, got Sheila Dillon to write our introduction for us, and we published it at the House of Commons with a couple of MPs. This is what Sheila wrote about it. She said, too often food aid organisations find themselves not just distributing food, but managing waste that should have been had responsibility taken for in the first place. Damaged, expired, or nutritionally inadequate food is passed on to food banks and community groups, leaving volunteers to bear the burden of sorting, repackaging, and disposing of what cannot be used. The costs, both financial and emotional, I'm going to say that again, and emotional, because a lot of the people who responded to our survey were deeply upset by the fact that they had to deal with rotten food, which they're just like, this could have fed people if we'd had it sooner. And it's quite soul-destroying for them. So this is then putting a burden on those who aren't creating the waste, but is putting a burden on people who are already struggling and kind of at burnout level trying to help people. And we also talked about the fact that redistributing food is not a solution. It's a symptom of a broken food system. And this is the point where we need everybody to come together and comment on this and say this isn't right. And we also had Sabine Goodwin, who comes from the Independent Food Association, Food Aid Network. And Sabine always says that the issue of poverty and overproduction are not sort of, they don't equal each other. So saying fighting hunger or ending hunger when channeling surplus into other people's baskets it's not really cool. And it also, again, gives that kind of, you know, second-class food for second-class people. It's not good. So what Sabine and her organisation always asks for is a cash-first or income-focused approach. So what I'm going to say to you is, if you can, donate cash to your local food pantry or food aid space. Don't buy more food from the supermarkets who will make more profit on it. Give the money directly to those organisations. They'll know what to buy, and they will go and buy what it is that people actually want, as opposed to 500 pita breads, some cereal, a bit of dodgy looking beans in tins, and if you're really lucky, after Christmas you get Wensleydale with after 8 chocolate in it. So yeah, please think about that. Right, this is going back to the utopia, you know, because I'm an optimist, and this is about, you know, food is human scale living, and it shouldn't be just that people are surviving. And this is where we're looking at the circular economy approach and how a healthy food economy can impact on the investment potential of an area. So could we embrace social innovation as a determinant of worth and thereby change strategies and planning and build some cultural cohesion between different user groups, thereby addressing inequalities? So could the people who are in charge of health or looking after young children's welfare maybe have a conversation with the planners occasionally, or vice versa? And the planners could maybe make sure that they're leaving a bit more green space in the new housing estates that they're creating, and maybe a shop, so you could buy a pint of milk without having to get into your very large Range Rover and drive down the road. Because everywhere I see these new estates coming up, there are never any amenities. There's never anywhere for anyone to go and buy a bit of bread or a pint of milk without having to either get in a car, get a taxi, or get on the bus. So it would be really nice if social value could fit into this, and also where we could ask questions about what existing residents want and what's the value of supporting independent retailers and caterers over chains and big business. We also have to think about sustainability, and I'm very aware, I am a white woman of a certain age, a certain amount of money. It's not always easy to be sustainable, especially if you're on a budget. And, what you don't need is someone finger wagging and saying, well, you shouldn't be eating that, and you shouldn't be doing this, and all the rest of it. But do the strategies written by policy directors, by planners, actually work in real life? If you're telling someone that they're supposed to source locally and recycle and do this and do that, if you're living in a flat on the 7th floor or in a tower block and there's nothing else, how are you supposed to do this? So there needs to be more dialogue. There needs to be more conversation with the people who are being put into these housing blocks to give them the opportunity to speak about what would work for them and what their needs are. So, again, also nicked off the internet, sorry. This is the question where I say, where is the voice of the citizen? Because I'm not talking about the consultation event held on a wet Thursday evening in October, no offence, Jerry. I'm talking about thinking differently about the impact different engagement models could have on creating those changes. So it's looking at, the entire food cycle, from purchasing and eating to disposal and waste minimisation. We could have focus groups and talk to different people and meet people where they are. Don't expect them to have to travel out of where their comfort zone is, but go in and chat. Ensure that, you've got screening of films, attendances at one-off workshops, and involvement with longer-term groups. And I'm really pleased to say that some of this is already in motion. There's been some sterling work done by Feeding Liverpool, by Squash, by other organisations within that space. We even did Apple Day at Speak Hall, which was fun. But why is it always the not-for-profit charitable sector that has to do this? Why is this not, looked at on a wider context? So the other thing as well, which is where, I need you lot to be the voices of the citizen, is ensuring that food has a place at the political table. There should be a focus on the fact that at the moment, only 23% of our fruit is grown in this country and 46% of our vegetables are imported. We should be looking at the issues that we've now got as part of the joy that is Brexit, because no longer are we part of the group where they would send things anyway. We are now the pains over the water with massive ways of getting things. So we are last on the list for any fruit and veg. And that's why when sometimes you go into a supermarket, you're not seeing any cauliflowers, or you're not seeing any greens, you're not seeing any of this, that and the other. It's because the suppliers are like, oh, we can't be bothered going to the UK. They're real pain. We'll just do it here, So we've got those issues, and that's also adding on to our costs. We also need to investigate alternative proteins and alternative ways of farming. So again, lovely to have the kindling folk here. Too much of our usable farmland is currently used to grow animal feed. And in fact, we've been doing some research in Knowsley, and we were told by one farmer that it was more profitable to grow birdseed than it was to grow human food, which is, not good. So food keeps being seen purely through the lens of commodity and investor profit, and not as the unifier of health, education, and locally focused economic prosperity that it could be. So you might recognise that child, Keenan. That was from one of our food sessions. No. So, infants and children need to eat well to develop their physical frame and mental cognition. If children are underfed, and by that I mean not fed an adequately nourishing diet, they will struggle to concentrate and comprehend learning. In Blackburn, Darwin, I did some work with teenagers, and they were sort of doing a lot of social media under the hashtag Blackburn gets hangry. And that was referring to the fact that as teenagers, a lot of them were young carers. Food really wasn't available in their house, and they were going into school quite hungry, or having had maybe a can of Coke to kind of set it. But what that was doing was it was actually making them really, really angry because they were hungry. Then they were acting up in school, and then they were being excluded. And it was all down to the want of a decent meal in the first place. We also raised some funds to enable a whole primary school in Knowsley to provide breakfast to their children. We called it Toasted because, you know, I love a pun. And we provided high-fibre, good quality bread to the school so that every child could start their day with a piece of toast. So they put toasters in all the classrooms, and whenever you came in, you could just go and grab a piece of toast. It didn't matter who you were, didn't matter what your dad did, didn't matter anything. It's just come and have a bit of toast, it's fine. And we had nutritionists at Leeds Uni did a study, and what was most interesting about that was it was young boys who weren't on free school meals for whom it made the biggest difference. They settled down, their behaviour was much better. And that then leads you to think about what they're being fed at home. Is it just like a sugary cereal that wears off really quickly? It's not carrying them through the whole thing. The same goes with the difficulty of getting children back on track after summer holidays when the family hasn't been able to rely on a school meal. Now, we know that we've got half, or we have had half, but that only ever covered six weeks of holidays, including summer and Easter and Christmas. And it also only covered 4 days of the week. I'm not sure what was supposed to happen on day 5. Maybe it was a Jesus thing with loaves and fishes, I don't know. But again, that food wasn't available on day 5, and it also wasn't available weeks 5 and 6, unless you were lucky and you had a local authority who'd managed to find a bit more money for you. So, one of the things that I've also talked about is the issue of how to sort of put some investment into things like feeding kids through the holidays, making sure there's toast in the rooms, etc. And that's why it's really important to advocate. And that's, again, where you as food citizens can ask those questions. Ask what your kids are being fed. You know, going to the outsourcing of school catering, that's not always been a good move, because big corporations such as Compass and Chartwells will take over these contracts, and their prime concern is for the share price and the profit they make, rather than the well-being of the children. So the food portions are weighed meticulously in these cases, and the same food portion is given to an 11-year-old boy as is given to a 7-year-old girl. Now, I don't know who's got children, but I can tell you an 11-year-old boy can eat a lot more than a 7-year-old girl. If you've got the outsourced school catering, that's your lot. Luckily, here on Merseyside, we have Food for Thought. And I was hoping they were going to talk about things, but I will talk briefly about what they do. And one of the things that's always struck me is there's always a salad bar, and children are encouraged to come up as many times as they want till they're full. If you're hungry, come and have some more dinner. It's absolutely fine. Because for some children, that meal is the only main meal they'll get in the day. It's the only hot meal they might get. And I've always loved that about Food for Thought, that it's a generous and very abundant school catering offer. And it's cooked in-house. They train people to cook in-house. Even if they're people who've never actually been, they've just been used to kind of, ping, but they get trained how to cook. Everybody's on real living wage or above. And there was mention before about how it's a social enterprise. Well, they work with a supplier, and I'm afraid I can't remember the name, but the supplier who, once they've spent a certain amount of money with them, they give money back to them, and then that's given out to schools who can apply for grants to do school gardens or to get some educational toys or whatever it might need, or trip, go to the museums or whatever. So again, it's all about keeping that money circulating locally and helping the children to have a better experience. So, you'll be glad to know I'm nearly finished. Things to consider. This was something I thought maybe have a little think about. So, food insecurity and unsustainable diets are not consumer choices. They are structural outcomes that we have to say that the solutions must shift from blaming individuals to rebalancing power in the food chain. 97% of the retail market is owned by the supermarkets. That is not a choice that you can make. That's your only option in some areas. It's a systemic problem. It's not individual responsibility, but we can collectively ask questions about this. Even within a globalised retail system, we can find points of action where local action could be a lever for systemic change. We can ask questions about health, where our food comes from, about the rights, the climate, the dignity, and the social democracy of where it's come from. So an example of that would be salmon, which we've got, people like a bit of salmon. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, and this is a bit of a spoiler, salmon is one of the most destructive foods that we can have on our plate. And that is because it is now fished in these big farms that are being opened all over the place. In fact, they're actually planning on opening some land farms as well. But what those salmon are fed is ground up small fish that is hoovered, quite literally, up from the edges of West Africa. And that is then destroying the livelihoods of West African farmers and families along there who used to make a living getting these small fish. Those small fish are now feeding salmon. So those West African villages are losing their livelihoods in order to foster our desire for cheap food. My lot have done a whole thing on it, which you can find on the website. But it's something you might want to think about when you're thinking about what fish to have for tea. Maybe look and see if there's something that's a bit more sustainable, if there's another option, what might be there. Building alliances is really important. So being able to bring together farmers and environmental activists and youth and consumers and everything. And you're not always going to agree, because that's life, we don't, but we need to have the dialogue. We can't stay in little silos. I can't just always talk to, environmentalists who will just go, yeah, Luce, yeah. I need to also have that dialogue with someone who'll call me out on it and go, well, that's bollocks, what are you talking about, girl? So we need to have that, and that's really important. Almost finished, guys, almost finished. What was I going to say? We cannot change food systems successfully without an awareness of the context environment in which people reside. So your lifestyles, cultures, and expectations can differ wildly. And what some might see as the relentless march of the supermarkets into every neighbourhood, disrupting local business and forcing closure of smaller ventures, some people will see is an opportunity of social ascension and gentrification that matches their aspirations for where they live. This is where community-focused consultations are really important. Our priorities might not be the priorities of the community, but you might be surprised. They could be. Again, a discussion group where I thought everyone was going to go, oh, we want a Tesco. Everybody said, actually, we'd really love a bakery. We really miss having fresh bread. And that's what they wanted. They didn't want a supermarket. They just wanted a bakery. So I think that's quite an important one to remember. So what can you do? As I said, don't be afraid to ask questions. Supermarkets will always say that they're responding to customer demand. But as someone's also said to me, no one's ever asked me what I want, and I've got a Tesco club card. So, the question, it's nonsense. You're not being asked, so you need to ask them. You need to say to them, it's not okay that you're stocking this amount of bread because I see you throw it out every night. Could you maybe do something different, Support local small, medium enterprises as much as you can. Not everyone can live sustainably or choose to buy organic veg at a farmer's market, but if you can, do. And for those of us who, the end of the month comes way after the end of the money, go and buy a pie from Home Baked. They're not that expensive. They're on a par with Greggs. If you are interested in local food, talk to Helen about the veg box scheme that she's going to get up and going in 2026. Go to Granby Market. Has anyone been to Granby Market? It's fantastic. And you can get homemade, fresh baked samosas that are out of this world. And you are supporting a little enterprise. I mean, Madam will tell you all about this in a minute. You have to also do things like, get your coffee from a local cafe. Don't go to Stargits. They're not paying taxes. The small businesses, support them. Check your own household for food waste and overpurchasing. It's boring but sensible. So you need to make lists, clear out the cupboards, use the freezer, then go shopping. You'll find lots of things on the Merseyside Recycling Waste Authority's listings. And we also did a cookbook, which is on our alchemickitchen.org website, which is all these zero waste recipes. Beautifully illustrated by Charlie over there. So the other question is, think about the food you buy. So one of the questions I might put to you is, why is that chicken so cheap? Is it because it's being raised in a shed and all the waste is destroying a local river? You know, you need to think about it. And for a lot of younger people, chicken is kind of the go-to protein. I know this. But maybe dial it down a little bit. Maybe have it once a week, not 4 times a week. The same goes for things like making food swaps for seasonal items and increasing your plant over meat consumption. Beans are delicious. They really are. I'm not lying there. You can eat more hummus, but make it with fava beans. Fava beans are grown in this country and they're very delicious. Who knew? Chickpeas are not. Chickpeas are expensive and difficult and use a lot of carbon to move them around the place. So don't use chickpeas, use fava beans and buy them from Hodmedod's if you can. So they're down south, but I mean, England's not that big, so we'll count them as local. And then I thought I would say this and say, I'm going to finish on a high note so that you don't all go and jump in the Mersey. Please don't do that. This is the Queen of Greens. This is a social enterprise mobile greengrocer that whizzes around areas of Liverpool 5 days a week selling fresh fruit and veg. We offer everyone. There's no criteria. We'll take cash, cards, Healthy Start, Healthy Boost, Rose vouchers, and if we have to, we will take your firstborn. All our produce is bought fresh every day, and we are also able to offer organic food at conventional prices because we got a grant in from Sustain. We are supported by Public Health Liverpool, thank you Liz, Feeding Liverpool and the Alexandra Rose Charity. And we also have the restaurant Manifest in the Baltic. They add £1 to every bill that goes through their till, and that gets donated directly to us. And that's because the owners, Paul and Charlotte, Scousers, live in Anfield. Their kids go to the nursery where our bus goes. They think it's great, so they're really kind and they support us. I think my final point, somewhere in here, is we need to be audacious in our thinking. We need to be collaborative in our partnerships. We need to express solidarity with those who live with inequity, and we need to make sure that our actions, even though it might just be buying the coffee from the little shop rather than star them, make sure your actions have some impact. We should also be celebratory. So, you know, a cup of tea and a bit of cake. You can always come round to mine. Thank you.